Hello, and welcome to another episode of the CamerataCast. This is your host, Andres Marquez, as always. And for those of you who don't know, the Camerata is a artists collective based out of Los Angeles County, where we just hold collaborative events and collaborative projects with the mission of, you know, inspiring collaboration amongst the creative workers and creative people of Los Angeles and elsewhere. This is our podcast, and on today's cast, we have a very special guest, Adam Kormondy. Hope I pronounced your last name right. Is
Close
that
enough.
close? Oh, it's close? Oh,
Yeah.
my bad. In any case, Adam is a very talented keyboard player, and we are going to shoot the shit with him today. Why don't you take it away from there?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Adam. I am, as Andres said, a keyboard player located in Torrance. Um, I started playing the piano when I was about 6. So it's been about 16 years at this point, and got into jazz in high school. And that's kind of where my background comes from. I went to UC Irvine for jazz piano performance and just recently graduated this past June. And so I just moved back to Torrance pretty recently after, not needing to be in Irvine anymore for school.
Hmm.
I mainly do a lot of performing, have a couple bands that, we go and do a lot of private events and things like that. But I'm also a pretty active composer. I release music under the name Albion Kristoff,
Mm-hmm.
which is like an alias that I use. And I've so far released one album under that called Eclipse. Um, and yeah, so just out here composing, performing, just trying to do the thing any way that I can.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I've been listening to a bit of the new album, Eclipse, and it is quite beautiful, honestly.
Oh, thank you
There's a
so
lot
much.
of jazz influence that I feel I can hear, though there are too many jazz artists out there to name. So I think Falling Into the Void with You kind of gave me a lot of Joshua Redman vibes. His album Elastic kind of gave me some of that sort of
Oh
vibe.
man, that
Uh,
that means a lot. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. It's just I was just making that connection. Purity and Isolation gave me like I'm not sure if you know Insane in the Rain music.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It definitely gave me like a very jazzy video game soundtrack kind of vibe. I loved it honestly. This is a very very good album.
Oh, thank you so much.
No problem. If you don't mind me kind of asking about the production process, this is, I don't think we've actually had a jazz musician on this, or we might have, and I've just lost count. But your music is very, very atypical from the kind of music that we have on the cast, or rather, the kind of musicians we have on the cast. And I'd love to hear some of the creative process that goes into an album like this. It sounds very organic, sounds very um, organic and very modern at the same time. So why don't you kind of explain, like, how did this all start?
Yeah, so this was a weird album to put together. Honestly, it actually is. It served as my graduating senior recital for school. Actually,
Hmm.
so basically, I've been writing for about the past. Well, I've been writing music, all my life, just in various small ways. But I really got into like the idea of composing probably about 3 years ago. And it's kind of a just a way of working through emotions and working through ideas that I have. So it's a lot of these some of these tunes, like for example, Period in Isolation, I wrote in about actually a couple days. um, Ironically enough, not about the pandemic. It was actually before the pandemic that it was
Oh, I
written.
see.
Just the name didn't age very well. I wrote it about something completely different, and then we were all isolated, and it was like, oh, all right, well, I guess it means this now. Um, so yeah, so basically, my last year of school, we normally you have to do a senior recital for the
Right.
bachelor in music program, where we'd be in the concert hall and you get people together and you do all your tunes and some covers and stuff. But obviously, we couldn't do that. So I had a suggestion pretty early on in the year, because I've been building up kind of a little bit of a home studio recording system for the past couple of years. And so I was rooming with the drummer on the album at the time, AJ Ocampo,
Mm-hmm.
and he was kind of putting together like a home drum recording setup. So I was like, hey, here's an idea. What if I expand my setup to get a full band? You expand your setup to get a good drum sound, and then we combine our systems, and then we can record both of our recitals in our apartment. And at the beginning of the year, he was like, oh, maybe. And the professors are like, we'll see what happens with, with the pandemic and all that. They weren't like crazy about the idea. But then as we got, a couple months in, it was like, oh, yeah, there's no way we're doing an in-person thing. So we kind of
Mm-hmm.
all moved to that. So I set up my system. He set up his system. We put them together. The music was not intended actually to go together. I didn't write these tunes thinking like, oh yes, this will be track one and track two. It was more that just during the pandemic, you know, trapped at home all the time, I didn't really have much to do except write and explore, various compositional ideas. So eventually it just got to the point where I could look through all my tunes and just say, oh, this one will work. Oh, I like this tune. This tune will flow into that really nicely. And I kind of just started putting them together like that. Once I had that, I had to confirm the band. We had to follow all of these health guidelines because it was a UCI project.
Right.
So we had to like sign these forms, and we had to like really work on negative tests, isolation before the recording session,
Mm-hmm.
masks during it. Although we actually got the okay for me to not wear a mask. So if you watch the videos of the performance, I didn't have to wear a mask, which was kind of nice. I mean, by that point, we were kind of starting to be vaccinated and stuff like that. So,
Right.
but still, there's still all these rules we had to follow because we didn't want to, risk anything or show UCI in a bad light. Of course, that's what
Yeah.
the administration was worried about. And yeah, so I got the band together. Phenomenal band, all fellow UCI musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Nelson and Andy Francis on tenor and alto sax. Matthew also played flute. Key Park on bass. AJ Ocampo on drums, and Nick Espoleta on percussion. And he also played some extra keyboard stuff that I couldn't get with my hands for a tune or two.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, yeah, we took a Friday and everyone came over and we sound checked and we basically just set up a studio in our apartment. If you watch the video, you can see how kind of not well put together it was. We were kind of just crammed in this living room. The
Mm-hmm.
saxes were like vertically stacked in the kitchen. The bass was like kind of in the hallway next to them. I had my keyboards kind of set up on one side. AJ was on the complete other side of the room with the drums. And then we kind of like put Nick in the middle there. Like there's like a giant couch in between us because we didn't have a place to put our couch. So we kind of just flipped it on the side and put a bunch of furniture. It was really fun actually to kind of tear apart our apartment like that to turn it into a recording setup. And then we took a day to rehearse. We played through all the tunes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the day after, on Saturday, we just spent the whole day pretty much. I think we started at 10 a.m. and I think we ended at, I want to say 6. Maybe a little later even because even then I had to do some overdubs and stuff like that like immediately following just while it was all together. So it was a pretty crazy day. I actually got severe tendonitis from it.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was. I raised my keyboard by like 3 inches the day before, and I guess I wasn't used to that, and so I got pretty bad golf elbow in both of my arms. So I actually couldn't play for like a week or two after. But it was fun, just getting together, just hammering it out. We did maybe 2 to 3 takes on each piece.
Mm-hmm.
Not even all of them. Some of them were one take. Like Antichrist Aria was one take. That was one that we had played before. I wrote that one a long time ago. And so we were kind of able to just do that one. And a couple others we got in one take. But yeah, for the most part, like 2 to 3 takes. Very little like replacement of parts. afterwards. The only thing that we had to replace is Purity and Isolation. The original flute part just did not work with our recording setup. The drums like bled into it and just destroyed it. So we had to overdub the flute in the end. If you actually listen really closely on Purity and Isolation, you can hear the OG flute part bleeding through the drums, actually.
Oh,
Which
dang.
you wouldn't notice it unless you know it's there. But if you listen really closely during the flute solo, you can hear little bits and pieces of the other flute solo kind of in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it was fine. It actually kind of reminded me of like that old tape recording when, they would take one take, but they would change it to a different tape, and then you still get some of the remnants of the old sound in the background. So it's kind of an Easter egg in that sense.
Yeah, I
And
definitely did not notice that. I'll
yeah,
have to
no,
go back
listen
and check that out.
really closely.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, at first it was like, oh gosh. Then at a certain point, it's like, yeah, it is what it is. The music is all really revolving around improvisation. Um, I'm technically like a jazz musician. That's what it says on my degree, and that's what I have to tell people when they ask me what I do. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, it's not like I'm devoted to the gospel of jazz. I'm very just in love with music and creativity. So kind of I use jazz more of a mindset than as a genre. Jazz is to me kind of just being able to take a set of chords, a musical idea, a motive, and being able to develop that in real time. You know, um, which I don't have to call it jazz. That's just the label I prefer to use because that's what I feel like jazz musicians do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone has the stereotype of like straight ahead jazz, right? Ting ting ting, walking bass, 4/4 swing kind of feel. That's what everyone thinks jazz is for the most part, and it definitely is. That's a historical reference for a lot of it, but you also get people like Robert Glasper and Esperanza Spalding, who they're still jazz musicians. They're still trained in that style, but they use their ability to improvise and create in a much more expansive way than just kind of playing the music from the 60s and the 50s.
For sure, for sure.
So a lot of it, a lot of my writing comes out of just improvising at the piano. Sometimes I'll sit at my keyboard. Well, at the time it was a keyboard. I have a piano now, but
Mm-hmm.
at the time, just on my keyboard, I might improvise for an hour and a half just freely, kind of letting any idea come up. And then eventually you settle on something, you go, oh, okay, this is repeatable. This is something that sounds good and that I can turn into something. That might be a chord progression that eventually turns into Period in Isolation or Return of the Philosopher King. And then from there, all the other ideas of, okay, now I have these chords, what can I give to each instrument to give them a unique part and a unique place. And then
Mm-hmm.
also thinking about the musicians I actually had at my disposal. So some of the tunes I even needed to rearrange because, like, for example, Civitas Sin Suffragio, the fifth song on the album, at that end where it's trading between it's me playing a synthesizer and Andy on the alto sax, and we're trading kind of choruses, and it goes up by a half step every single time. On my original version of that tune, it was actually just a synth solo the entire time.
Mm.
And it was like a 2-minute long, huge synthesizer solo on like the original demo we made, and it was really boring, and it kind of just went up by half steps every time. And at a certain point, you're like, okay, yeah, we get it. It's a synth. You can do that kind of shredding kind of stuff. Cool.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh well, I have Andy, and Andy is just a phenomenal player. Can play anything, and so it was like, oh well, I should, not in a negative sense, but take advantage of what I have here. And
Yeah.
so I turned that into a trading section, and now all of a sudden the whole thing breathes a lot more. And now it's kind of, we're kind of playing around between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I recorded the synth completely separately from the full band because I'm playing the piano as like comping
Right.
during that whole thing. So we actually just recorded it like silence during all the synth solo parts,
Mm-hmm.
just the rhythm section going, and then Andy would take his parts, and then eventually, immediately, that was the last tune we did actually for the whole recording. Immediately afterwards, while everyone else was uh, tearing down and packing up, I just went and recorded that solo first take, and that. So yeah, it was a really fun experience. I was actually hoping to do a couple other recordings in that room before we ended up moving out of that apartment, and it didn't really get to happen. But it was a really unique kind of situation, and kind of taught me that you don't really need a studio necessarily. There's home recording is so advanced now. We can
Mm-hmm.
do so much on our own without having to pay the premium for that space.
Right, right. Yeah, that's the thing that really grabbed me about this, especially when you started explaining the recording process. I wouldn't have guessed that it was all recorded in somebody's apartment. It felt very. Oh, I don't like using the word professional. It has a strange connotation to it, but it felt like there was so much more of I guess, production value, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's very surprising to hear that this all came together in your apartment. That's awesome, honestly.
Yeah, thank you. It was a real investment. I was doing a lot of research, on various gear things that we could use to make the sound a little better, like isolation shields for the horn mics.
Right.
We experimented with the drum mic placement for
Hmm.
weeks, really, just to get it perfect. And even like the way we set up our furniture, like the couch is on its side in the middle of the room, and we even use that as a way to kind of isolate the kick mic a little bit more,
Hmm.
like by kind of just placing it around that. It created a shield that kind of blocked out a lot of other noise. So it was really nerve-wracking because you're going to record in a room like that and you don't have any sort of isolation on the drums. It's like, are the drums going to bleed into everything?
Right.
Are we going to get completely screwed here? And we thankfully didn't. It's also a real testament to the mixing and mastering on the album, which was done by my friend Emerson Poulin.
Hmm.
He did a fantastic, fantastic job. I knew I wanted to use him for the mixing and mastering, so I hit him up and I sent him everything, and we really worked through it. He was able to use all of his studio magic to kind of clean it up and turn it from just an apartment recording, which um, is a little scary,
Hmm.
and really turned it into something that sounds like we could have done it in a studio. So I'm
Yeah.
really grateful. I'm really grateful for everyone who was on this. It really was a team effort. I wrote the music, but without the actual people who were on it and who helped make everything else a reality, we wouldn't have gotten very far.
Hmm. Yeah, dude, it's an awesome job, and I feel like anybody involved with that would be proud of that kind of work. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you don't mind me, I mean, it's awesome to hear about this project, and everybody listening. Please check out. Uh, my bad, brain fart. Please check out Eclipse. It's on all the streaming platforms. It is a glorious jazz influenced album. I did want to ask though, you have a whole bunch of other like really cool content on your Instagram that I just kind of wanted to at least go over because a lot of it is super cool to check out. There was a stream from 2020 that I had watched a bit of, the AJ stream. I really dug that, honestly. It was just an hour of different pieces. There was a Beck song in there. There was in Mornings, I believe, Mornings by Beck.
Uh-huh.
It's really cool, honestly. How long have you been doing that?
Yeah, so that's the drummer on Eclipse, AJ Ocampo. I was living with him for the past like 3 years throughout school. He's a
Hmm.
phenomenal drum player, and we've since I met him. I actually met him at orientation, like first week of UCI orientation during the summer,
Hmm.
and it was like, oh, you're in the jazz program too. cool, you're my friend now. And then we started living together, and it was like, oh, okay, we have to work on all this stuff. And during the pandemic, we'd always talked about, because my middle name is Joseph, so I'm technically AJ too.
Right, right.
He's Andrew Jonah, and I'm Adam Joseph. So I was like, dude, I think we were just like hanging out one night, and I was like, dude, we can be AJ AJ. He was like, whoa, yeah. And then during the pandemic, we just were like, man, like there's not much to do. We were in school, of course, and online school was online school.
Yeah, yeah.
But we had all this downtime, so we're like, yeah, let's just start doing it. And all of it was literally all the sound was coming through an amplifier. We didn't have any sort of setup, just Instagram Live, play, turn it on, and then we actually were just freely improvising for that whole hour. So none of those pieces, except for when I decided, like you said, the morning by Beck, I was learning that at the time, and I kind of just wanted to throw it out there.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it was just a stream of consciousness. We would go until Instagram would kick us off at the hour, because they only let you do an hour. So actually, the first time we did it, it was kind of funny. We went for like an hour and 40 minutes, I think.
Jeez.
Yeah, but it cut us off at the hour. And neither of us looked at my phone sitting on the desk recording us for all that time. So we look up and the stream's ended, and they're like, "Oh, you've been kicked." And we were like, "Oh shit." Well, oh well. Yeah, so we did that weekly for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've kept like 3 or 4 up on my Instagram. There were more. I didn't just put all of them up.
Right.
Yeah, it was just a good chance for us to experiment, try new things. I had all of my keyboards set up, and I was just kind of like jumping from one to the other, going, okay, let me go to this random sound. What can I do with this sound? Sweet, let's develop it into a piece.
Mm-hmm.
Until the next moment when AJ's like, oh, what fun thing can I do on the drums that maybe I haven't been thinking about? Let me try this. Cool, develop something. So it was really just a good practice in kind of on the cusp, creating music, right? Because we spend a lot of time. Do you write music, Andres?
I do actually. I do like to, spend time composing and stuff, and I've done a few different soundtracks for like student films and
Oh, sweet.
a couple of pieces for like a cable network TV show or something.
Oh, really?
It was a very bizarre affair. That that whole few months that I spent with this network doing their various tasks. Wouldn't do it again. Wasn't cool. But in any case, yes, I've composed quite a bit, and I do write for some of the bands I'm in as well. I
Sweet.
just like to write. I like writing music. It's very fun. It's very challenging as well. Trying to limit myself so that I can see what sorts of new compositional quirks I can come up with the limitations that I try to establish.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. So then you definitely know that there's like such a tendency, to be sitting at the keyboard, sitting at the computer, going over, you know, one measure of music for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, yeah,
Just changing a melody note, like, oh, do I want A or A sharp here?
for
Oh,
sure.
oh, A is cool. Oh no, I like A sharp. Oh, but A, and and there's this like almost neurotic aspect to that we just sit and we just kind of go over the same stuff. And so AJ was a really good chance to like not think about that kind of stuff. We would basically just set up a chord progression, and he would set up a really strong like beat behind it, and then I'd have to kind of say, okay, what's my melody gonna be? And I would just do something, and there was no opportunity to change that or to go back and edit it in the moment. So as I was going, I was just kind of like, creating a melody and saying, oh, that's cool. How can I develop this? And it was kind of nice to get out of the going over. Editing can be such a pain sometimes, because you start to lose trust in what you've actually written.
Exactly.
You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I wrote this great piece, and you listen to it like a week later, and you're like, oh, this is awful. Let me change everything. And then a week later, you're like, oh no, I like the original thing. It's so easy to make those changes, without some kind of like inner discipline, which I think is something that I've been really trying to work at, to trust myself that what I write is what I want to write. But in that moment, yeah, we could just mess around with that stuff. And now what we originally were trying to do is to do an actual AJ album.
Ooh,
Um,
that'd be sick.
we're still talking about it. We're still working on it. Now we don't live together, so the
Mhm.
logistics are a bit trickier. And we're trying to put together like a piano trio to get gigs and stuff. But definitely at some point, I'm going to start going through all that material, because some of those tunes, yeah, it came out pretty well for just inventing them on the spot. And so it'd be nice and fun to go and actually like notate them down and be able to actually make like full productions out of them. So that's on the docket. Millions of ideas for the future. You just have to actually do them.
I get you. Yeah, um it's always this sort of thing where for editing specifically, because I do a lot of how do you say, of the production for the
Hmm.
bands that I'm in as well. Specifically for Big Hat Logan, we just released an album and I did all the mixing, the mastering, and all that. And there are just times where I will spend an inordinate amount of time on one instrument just trying to get that sound right. Or when I'm like writing a melody, like I spent way too much time on a specific on a melody for a song called "Twist of Fate," where it's got like this surfy kind of vibe, but before the first verse, there's this weird sort of guitar feature, and I was just like, I was trying my best to just make it sound all spooky and '60s surf kind of sound.
Hmm.
I spent way too much time with it. I had like just these different iterations, and was like, but where does it go? How do I resolve it? Like, how do I make it more interesting so that it doesn't sound so diatonic? It was just like, it's a mess. And it ended up sounding pretty cool, but it's just a testament to how like how many options there are in just one aspect of music alone, and how that you could be constricted by choice.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yes, there are 12 notes, assuming that we're using like that Western tuning system, but
Right.
what you can do with the 12 notes is nearly infinite, and then you bring in timbre and instrumentation and rhythm, and at a certain point, the way you mix it. And there's just all of these steps along the way. And I think I think really what we all should be working on. I have a couple composition students, and I try to make this like the main thing I tell them. You got to trust yourself. That's the most important aspect, I think. Really assuming that when we write, we are writing to the best of our ability.
Right.
And you can change something a million times. That's not going to make it necessarily better. So you got to really trust yourself, and you got to say like, okay, like, is this bad because it's bad, or is it bad because I've heard it 5,000 times in the last 3 days, and now I know like every single aspect of it.
Hmm.
And then you show it to someone else, and they go like, oh, that's fantastic, oh, I love that. And you're like, yeah, but don't you hear this? And they're like, what? I don't care about that. That's like that 2 milliseconds of like snare reverb tail at that one point. Oh wow, that's really ruined the whole piece. Like, no one's gonna say that,
Yeah. Yeah.
but we'll be sitting there and we'll be adjusting settings on our damn reverb plugin. Like, oh, if I don't set this perfectly, it's gonna destroy everything.
Hmm.
So trust in ourselves, trust in our creativity.
Exactly. We can't always be our own worst critic. It'll definitely just slow us down more than we need or deserve.
There's too many people that want to bring us down, so like we shouldn't be bringing us down.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Can I have any more advice on composition or producing specifically from you? Given that you have a lot of experience under your belt, you've got a lot of great compositions under your belt. It seems to me that like it's almost like your life revolves around it, which is amazing. And I'm just making that assumption, of course, but
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know if I've ever like put it in those words, but when I really do think about it, like writing is one of my favorite things to do. You know,
yeah.
it really is. At least for me, there are a lot of reasons to write. One is, of course, the need for self expression, the need for
Mm-hmm.
self creativity. I
Mm-hmm.
think we all feel that to a degree. Art and music is such an essential human activity, that to kind of create something as your own and put it out
Right.
really just gives a good feeling. But also, it's being part of that tradition.
Yeah.
Like one thing that a professor used to always tell me is he'd say, "You need to find your place in the history. You need to find your where you fit in to this puzzle." Because I mean, depending on how far back you look, we have centuries of music making that we are, indirectly or directly the lineage of,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if I study Bill Evans and, I love Bill Evans, right? But I can go back to the people who inspired Bill, and I can go back to the people who inspired the people that inspired Bill.
Right.
You can go back to, I mean, at a certain point, you study composition, you end up like learning about things like motivic development, which goes back to like Bach and Beethoven, and the classical masters. And maybe we're not writing music like that, but there's a lot of principles in that we can take. And so I really like feeling part of that tradition, that like for the rest of time, people are going to write music, and even if none of my music actually survives, even if it dies out, you know, at least in this moment, I'm actively taking part in the continuation of that tradition. There's a connection in there, and there's a connection to everyone else who writes music as well. And I also think it helps you play music better. There is writing and there's performing, and those are two separate things, but they don't have to be completely separate. A lot of things that I write, I actually, so I've been playing a solo piano set at Primo Italia in Palos
Mm.
Verdes every Saturday night for
Oh
the
wow.
past couple weeks. Actually, this week I'm going to start on Fridays too. So Fridays and Saturdays at Primo Italia. And I just kind of play solo piano from like 6 to 9, for 3 hours. And, in that time, I'll play some jazz standards. I'll play, some covers that I've been working on. I'll play some tunes that I like. I'll play some of my originals, but I'll also just freely improvise in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, and as you do that, you kind of just feel yourself connecting to that tradition, to say like, oh, I want to kind of play something Debussy-esque right now. What does that mean? What principles can I take from that? And then by studying, someone like Debussy, you start to get a sense of those principles, right? And then when you write things that use those principles, you can directly say like, that's where this inspiration comes from. In an indirect way, like you're continuing that legacy. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to do as writers is, find our influences. Not that you have to stick to a particular influence forever. You don't have to like declare yourself the next continuation of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard and only make music that's going to like follow their example.
Right.
But for like Tune the Tune, right? You say, "Oh man, I mentioned King Gizzard because I just looked up Big Hat Logan. I saw that you put them in the bio for that on Spotify um,
Oh yeah, yeah,
as
we
an
do.
influence."
That's definitely on the part of our bassist Nick. He kind of introduced that band to us, and it has kind of come up in a lot of our music because Nick definitely
Uh huh.
he helps with the compositions as well.
Yeah, they're one of my favorite bands. So I saw that and I was like, oh, I love King Gizzard. But from Tune to Tune, right? You say like, oh man, I love this music. How can I continue this legacy of music? And
Right.
people do that all the time. I know people who are obsessed with writing classical era music. They will write music based on the rules laid down from Beethoven and Mozart.
Right. Right.
And they love that because to them, like that's the tradition that they want to uphold
Hmm.
in writing. And even if, obviously it's not negative to say this. It's just truth. Like, no one's ever going to write something that's going to like get to the same level as like Beethoven's music.
Hmm.
If you're following those rules, it's a different era. Beethoven has a good 300 years on us, right?
Yeah.
But you are still continuing that tradition. And even if it doesn't, even if we don't find fame, we're continuing the legacy of the music that we love. And that is, I think, one of the most important things that we can do. So, um, big rules is just, yeah, find your influences, find the principles that make the music that you like, the music that you like. Everyone has their own quirks and their own, go-tos. I was reading a book that was like, you know, people are so obsessed with being original, right? That they kind of like throw away things that work, because they don't want to rehash stuff. They don't want to step back over themselves. Um, right.
Right.
So, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here.
No, yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to step back over themselves. So the book said, like, if Chopin, right, he wrote mazurkas, right, the Polish dance. If he wrote one mazurka and then decided, like, I can never write a mazurka again, we wouldn't have all of that beautiful music. And every single one, even though they follow a similar style, a similar dance form, they're all so unique and beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes out of him, finding what worked for him. So for us, that's what we need to do. We got to find what works for us and then follow those paths. And then eventually branch off, do other things. We don't have to just write mazurkas for the rest of our life. But, we don't have to also throw away good ideas just because we've done them before. So I think, yeah, influences and principles, and then just writing a lot. Like, I was doing this thing for a while with some friends. We had a composing collective, we called it, where every week we would start a piece. So that was the rule. You just had to start something, right? And then we'd get together in a Zoom call, because this was during the pandemic, and we'd just share what we wrote, right? And everyone would give feedback on it, like, oh yeah, man, this melody is really cool. Like, here's some chord ideas you could do, or like, here's someone you should listen to like get some timbral ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And just by doing that, it was like I would sit down, I'd write like 4 measures of a potential piece, and that'd be it. And that would be my work for the day. Even just that, by keeping yourself writing, even if you don't go back to that stuff, you're still going to have that for the future. You're still going to be able to go back and use what you learn from that. And then sometimes you also develop them the tunes. I mean, that's how Falling Into the Void with You started. I actually, just that intro with the that we kind of develop over time.
Yeah.
That's all I presented at one of our meetings. That was it. I said, oh, I have this like idea. And they're like, dude, that sounds like the intro to like a much bigger piece. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And then next thing you know, put some time into it. And that's where Falling Into the Void with You came from. So I think just the act of composing, not thinking of composing as some sort of special higher state, but just making it a part of your daily life, making that creation just kind of part of what you do. You sing a melody while you're on the bus home from work, right? Write it down. Make a voice memo, record it. Use that in a future idea. I like to try to tell myself to think of writing music like breathing, or like walking, or drinking, right? It's just something that I want to make a part of my life and my experience, and do everything else from that premise.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As opposed to, oh, I need the perfect situation to write music. I can only do it, with this ritual and this time, and it's a very special thing, because then you put more pressure on it, and that that makes it harder on yourself.
For real. All right, we are going to wind down our cast for now. I do want to thank you again, Adam, for wanting to be on the show. You brought some incredibly enlightening information and just advice and the story behind the album and your streaming work. It's just I don't know. It's a unique, and it's awesome to see that kind of creative story happening. Before we go, I did want to ask if there's anybody in your local scene, your local creative scene, that you want to shout out, give some love to on the show. Just feel free to fire away on that.
Oh yeah, I mean there are a lot of people. I have to call out my good friend Key Park, the bassist. He does a this is an OC, but he does a open jam, not a jam, a busking session every Friday night in Seal Beach. They call themselves Seal Beach Jazz. And they're
Huh.
absolutely fantastic. Please go watch them if you can. I think they have an Instagram for Seal Beach Jazz. I also have to call out many of my LA musician friends,
Hmm.
Rashawn Green, Damani Holland, Ronnie Hurd, fantastic musicians playing in all sorts of cool projects. One of their groups is called Respect the Real RTR, and they've been performing every now and then in Leimert Park. And they're just insanely talented musicians, and I've enjoyed getting to play with them when I get the chance. Um, and who else? There are so many people, so many great musicians out there. It's you can search
Totally.
for them for the rest of your life. Just in general, though, I will say support the musicians you don't know as well.
Hmm.
Music is something that we pursue, but it's not always easy to pursue. And so, to the audience, if you're ever seeing someone performing on a street corner, give them $1, give them something, you know, buy them a meal, get them a drink. You're at a restaurant, you see someone playing, go give them something because um, we all deserve that support. And without the support of local artists, music will cease to exist. Oh, I also sorry, big one. I have to call out Caesar Gandara, fantastic guitarist. He just released a music video a couple days
Hmm.
ago, and the piece is also going to be up. I can't remember the name of the music video right now, but please look up Caesar. He also runs a fantastic music festival called Fusion LA that will be taking place on November 6th. I am excited to announce that the Albion Kristoff Quartet will be headlining at that
Hell
festival.
yeah. Hell yeah.
So please come out. It's all for charity. It's a great festival. Tons of different musicians. The last one was in February 2020, and I got to be there, and it was just an absolutely amazing time. So please check that out,
Hmm.
and yeah, absolutely.
Sick. I just want to give one quick shout out. Thank you to Jess and the whole crew from the Moon and the Milk. They also run a amazing little backyard show venue called the Mess in Koreatown,
Ooh.
and we were lucky enough to get to hold an event there on September 18th. Not lucky enough to evade scrutiny by the cops who shut down our event. But it was still an incredibly fun experience nonetheless. And again, very grateful to Jess and the gang for letting us use your space. It was a very fun experience, and we hope to get to do it again with y'all soon. All right.
Awesome. Hope that comes back.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's they've been holding they were holding events for like a month and a half before our little incident. I really do hope that they get to get back to work on that because they are an incredible asset to the creative community. We all need more spaces like the Mess to be able to hold big collaborative creative events like that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Um, but yeah, again, thank you to Jess and them, and thank you to everybody that Adam laid out. Because without y'all, our creative communities would not be nearly as vibrant. Um, that's what this whole thing is about. We want to give love to the people who help make our communities as rich and diverse and incredible as they are now. And thank you to Adam for joining the cast. It was
Yeah,
amazing getting to speak with you.
thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Yeah, no problem
I
at
look
all.
forward to any Camerata events that are going to happen in the future. Let me know.
Y- Yeah, yeah. I will. I'll shoot you some text about that. We are currently planning for late October into November and December, and I'll let you know what's happening. And feel free to come by if you're available.
Yeah, I hope to be for that.
Mm-hmm. All right. This is Andres Marquez, your host as always on the CamerataCast. Thank you all for tuning in, and I do very much hope to catch you all on the flip side with our next episode. Adios.